Sound check, 1, 2, 3. This 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Thanks. Good morning. It's nice the weather's gotten back to something wet and overcast, isn't it? It's comforting and homey. My wife Jennifer is in Fort Lauderdale, Florida this morning, where it's 74 degrees, sunny, and she is dealing with her mother's dementia and her stepdad's galloping metastatic prostate cancer and the crumbling of that world. So she did get one morning at the beach just to be out. But how's the inner weather? The outer weather is like this. How's your inner weather today? What I plan to focus my reflection on today is this mysterious capacity we have of learning to turn awareness toward our own inner experience. What we could dramatically call the third eye, opening the third eye, which is mindfulness. Learning to have an eye open inwardly to really know what's going on so that we're not so robotic. And I got to that through the reflection that's been up the last few days on the way that around the world autocratic rulers are using enemy imaging to create the other. They're really preying on that vulnerability that we have as humans. And unless we know what's happening inside ourselves, we can fall into any ideology. We can hate anyone. So hooray for mindfulness and consciousness, because it does give us some degree of freedom. Who's here for the first time today? Wow, a lot. Huh? You're sitting right in the front. It's bold. What if you have to, that's you? Are you extroverted? Extremely, well, me too. Right. Well, that's quite a few of you. I invite you to come next Sunday morning. Is it Sunday? Is that the first Sunday next Monday? Sunday? Yeah. I do a 1-hour introduction to the community and to Insight Meditation back in the living room at 9. So come to that if you wish. So I have a wish for you, those of you that are here for the first time. I hope this is a really great fit for you, and that this could become a spiritual home for you, and that the teachings of the Buddha can really light up your life. Because it's quite a thing to go to a new spiritual center and to try it out. It means that there's something alive in you. There's something that really is hungering, or that's already awake and has an intuition of what's possible. So that's a marvelous thing. So, a choice now. Either stay in the solitude of your own being, or please turn to a neighbor and introduce yourself and speak with them about something for which you're really grateful. Could be a very small thing, the fact you got to have breakfast, or you got to walk up the stairs, but introduce yourself. How about that? Yes. Now? Yes. For 2,500 years, human beings have, almost 2,600, human beings have followed the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha, who was an ordinary human being just like us. I find that very encouraging because it means, and what he taught was the Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths, and lots of other counted things, with the purpose of allowing, encouraging, supporting other people in having the same experience he had. Not through worshiping him, but through actually developing our own consciousness and waking up. It's a very encouraging teaching, I think. Hi. And so there are these chants that have come down to us over all these years, taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. We have a modern rendition of it. Refuge in the Buddha, refuge in that in us which is awake. Refuge in the Dharma, in what we discover when we're awake. What do we really experience when we're not in some ideology, but we're in direct clarity of seeing or knowing? And then refuge in the Sangha, the community of practice and the community of life that's awakening. So please join in as you wish. We'll go through them twice. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and love. Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of mindful harmony. Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and love. Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of mindful harmony. Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya. And now the best part. We get to do nothing for a while. Ah, what a relief. Nothing to achieve, nothing to prove. This moment is like this, exactly as it is. And so, to what shall we attend? And the map of what to attend to is exquisitely presented in the Buddhist teachings in the Satipatthana Sutra, the sutra on the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And we begin with the body. To come home to the body, be aware of this that you take to be your body. Notice, anywhere you place awareness, which itself is a pretty mysterious thing. How do you do that? But if you bring awareness into your hands, they're alive. You know them as life. In fact, you don't even really find hands if you bring awareness there. You find a cloud of sensations. If you bring awareness into where your body touches the floor and the cushion, the chair, pressure, contact. Or maybe someplace where there's discomfort or even pain in your body. Or your face. So much life in the lips, the cheeks, the eyes. And ever since that moment of your first breath, pretty dramatic moment, you have exited one way or another the body of your mother. The umbilical cord is not functioning as it did. And you start building up carbon dioxide. And something kicks off that says, breathe. And so you did. Everyone in the room was very relieved. You turned pink. And ever since then, this breathing in and breathing out has been your new umbilical cord, your new lifeline, connecting you to all of our oxygen-producing brethren and sistren and otherin here on the earth. And this breathing takes place in only one moment, in the only moment, which is now. So come home to the present moment, to your life of now. And notice that each breath has a beginning, a rising to fullness, a decline, and then a disappearance. And we really are attending to the actual sensations, not some idea or some imagination, some fantasy. We're not breathing in through our feet or our hands. We're attending to the rising and falling of the chest and abdomen, or the sensations at the nostrils. Of course, the mind, the land of the realm of fantasies, the realm of the past and the future, is very powerful, very seductive, very entrancing. And so time and again, we lose contact with the present, with the breath, with now, and we get lost in some past reflection, some imagination of the future. The trances of everyday life. But we have this extraordinary tool of mindfulness, which illuminates these fantasy journeys that we live in and allow us to be here in the present moment, breathing in and breathing out. compared to the many entertainments and profoundly constant stimulation we get through our sense doors, the sensations of breathing are rather mild. So there's some learning to how to interest the mind. How to interest the mind in just when does the breath start? This breath right now. When really does it reach its fullness and begin the descent? When does it end? Sometimes awareness might notice the first beginnings of a thought, even before it's fully formed. Other times, you might be lost for 5 minutes. It's no matter how long it is. The fact that awareness, mindfulness, awakeness actually springs into being is a miracle. And the Buddha's discovery that we can cultivate this capacity, this realizing that we are not the thoughts, we are not the emotions, we are not the beliefs, we are ultimately not even this body, but we are something much utterly mysterious, which is that which knows. So please don't start a war with the wandering mind or with your emotions. We have plenty of war in the world. It never works. So why have one inside? Instead, we bring love. Love in that there's room for everything. There's room for this breath. There's room for this wandering mind. There's room for this sadness. There's room for this joy. Each breath has a beginning. See if you can notice that beginning. And then make the subtle, continuous effort to stay with the in-breath through its entire lifetime. One of the very bright lights of the last century in Thailand was Ajahn Chah. From him we have the guidance in order to bring your practice into perfect balance in any moment. Simply remember, this moment is like this. There's lots of wandering mind, or there's none. The mind is filled with desire or disliking. The mind is joyful, blissful. The body is at ease or is experiencing pain. It's like this. Meditation is about simply starting over millions of times. We fall into one of the trances of life and we wake up. We fall in again, we wake up. We wake up into the experience of having some influence, some choice over what happens next. We start shaping our life towards something more happy, more loving, more compassionate. Kind of remarkable that something as simple as mindfulness and concentration and the other enlightenment factors, of course, but something as simple as waking up allows this radical transformation of life. So please come home to the actual sensations in this, your body. For a few more minutes, a few more blessed opportunities to be awake here, now, in this that breathes. How we end a period of training is significant. Perhaps the timer goes off, or you just realize it's time to move on. So take a moment to take stock. What's happening? How has this period of sitting quietly been? What's been happening? Notice if there's any judgment. It should have been different. I should have been better. Should have been more concentrated. Or, wow, I'm really getting it now. And then take a little tour in your body. Notice your feet and legs alive. The buttocks and pressure there. All the life in the pelvis. The pubic bone and the abdomen and solar plexus and chest. The world of feelings and emotions. Fingers, thumbs, hands, forearms, elbows, upper arms, shoulders, the sacrum and the back. It's all alive. The neck, the jaw, the tongue, the lips, cheeks, forehead, scalp, eyes. The eyes as life. And notice now the intention that's required, the plan, to open the eyelids, to do the work of lifting the eyelids, and then notice how objects appear, how seeing happens. Seeing and knowing of seeing. Seeing. And then maybe there's discomfort and you want to shift a little bit or stretch a little bit, but do it really consciously. One of my hopes, something I always emphasize when I teach residential retreats, is that each person will have the realization that it's a misperception to think, okay, now I've done my meditation for the day, right? Check, got that done. Once we understand, there's not an end to meditation. Now it's the meditation of being a little more relaxed. Maybe it's moving an arm or a hand, and it becomes the meditation of being present with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or having a conversation on the phone. Seamless practice. Sitting quietly like this brings basic sanity. Please raise your hand if you feel less stressed, more sane than you do when you walked in. That's powerful. It's very low calorie. Well, Mr. Dalton, you game? Yeah. So I invite you to be really present with Jim. I'm all wrapped up in here again. Let me take this off here.
All right. New position. Pressure on the bottoms of the feet. Attending to these multiple muscles and bones in the feet. We'll just rock a little bit and notice how they engage when you move forward, over to the side. Back on the heels, up on the toes. There's all sorts of intelligence in this complicated little platform we stand on. So you make sure the platform is stable and wide, about shoulder width apart. And Robert was talking about seamless mindfulness. So sync and seamless movement upward with a breath. And see if you can stay with the transition and the descent. The hands are giving you a visual indication of your breath. So the mind observing through the eyes is reinforced by the feeling of air coming in, air coming out in a seamless rhythm. Can we stay with the rhythm all the way through? Lifting and opening. Longer breath in, longer breath out. And then we'll reach overhead, pretending to paint a rainbow. How does that feel in the whole body? Painting the rainbow. And then release the arms. Sink a little lower, across the wrists, come up the center line, and then separate the clouds. Long breath in. And seamless descent. And then pause and feel the stillness. And then imagine a central axis from the crown of your head down to the floor between your heels, and just rotate on that axis, opening your arms, pushing with one arm, pulling with the other. Now you've got two seamless objects, the gesture of pulling and the gesture of pushing. How does the mind do that? Stays with both of them, moving like lightning from one to the other. And then just testing the shoulders to see how round you can make a gesture with no discomfort, no stress, no strain. So then we shift into another kind of gesture, moving the weight into one leg and lifting. The heel comes off the floor. Then the other side. Seamless attention all the way through. Breathing in as you rise. Breathing out, coming down. Turning, gazing at the moon. Again, exhale down, inhale up. If I'd asked you to stand here and do 30 mindful breaths, you would have said, what? But we're past 30 already. Seamless breathing. Seamless attention. And pressing across, feeling the open fingers moving effortlessly through space, through the atmosphere of the room. No friction at all. Effortless attention. Gliding over one side and then the other. New gesture. We'll reach over, lift one arm up and focus on the palm. Let the other palm face the earth. Bring both hands across. And switch. And we have a name for this gesture called cloud hands. So the upper hand is imagined as a cloud moving across the sky. And the lower hand is a shadow that stays with the cloud all the way across from horizon to horizon. Order and harmony in our little universe here. Okay, shifting again, moving the center of gravity forward. We'll splash in the sea, rock back, move the center of gravity backward. Simple movement, but seamless. Attending to the sea below and to the sky above. And then shifting, watching the weight move into one leg, and resting back. attending to balance and movement and breathing. One mind with all these skills, faculties, riding the waves. One mind in the room playing the symphony. Turning, testing the other boards. And turning again. Palms up, move forward, palms down. Feel the flexibility in the wrists and the elbows and the shoulders. The entire arm dances forward, dances back. And sometimes runs into somebody else. Okay, shift, open. If you make contact, it's not an attack. It's a blessing. All right, now we come back to a more constrained pattern. We'll be within a little cylinder here for a second. Take a breath. Feel the stillness, but the life is not still. There's life through the whole body. Another breath. And sink, making a fist. Let the dragon rise from the sea, noticing new sensations, sinking and rising on one side and then the other. Now we spread our wings and fly with the cranes, up on the toes. And then turn the wheel. Get everything moving. Seamless circle. Changing direction. The microphone doesn't like being jostled around in my back pocket. Click, 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 click. Back to the center. Opening one arm, or lifting one arm and one knee. Find the balance seamlessly as best as we can. Some days are easier than others. All right. And the last gesture is just breathing in, seamlessly releasing, noticing beginnings and endings, the end of the out-breath, beginning of the in-breath. Here now. Then feeling the stillness and the little dance that continues with a living organism. There's never real stillness. And this river of sensation becomes the object of our attention. Breathing with the whole body. And then sinking one more time and opening. And down the center. We'll do that a couple more times to just bring an ending gesture to our practice, but it's a transition to the next step. Bringing our hands together in gratitude. We're still standing, breathing, and enjoying our friends in mindful movement. And where are we? This is February, March something or other. The third Saturday in March, I'll be doing this for a 4-hour half-day retreat, whatever the date is. Join me if you can.
KB, are you here? Yeah, off the counter.
Ribbit.
Oh, it's the bottom of a candle. Well, here we are. This is a Burmese monk's bowl. I got to go to Burma 1978 for 1 week. I'd gone with my then wife, who was a professor at Lewis and Clark. We took 25 students to India for 5 months. We were pretending to be grown-ups, and it was wild. There was a 1-week free travel period, and her teacher in San Francisco was very devoted to an old fellow in Burma named Tangpulu Sayadaw, who at age 8 or 10 or 12 went into a cave and stayed there for 28 years, supported by the local community. When he came out, he became a very famous teacher in Burma, kind of like the Dalai Lama on steroids, really, in terms of how he was respected for good reason. Anyway, we went and spent a week there, got in, challenging to get into to Myanmar at that point. And when I left, he sent me with my monk's bowl. And the monk's bowl, this is traditionally, the monk wears this, walks through the village, or in modernity through the city, and people put food in it, and then he gets to eat that, and that's his food for the day, 1 meal a day. This has been used for a very different purpose. In a way, it's a similar purpose. It's symbolic. And it looks like a bowl, but it's actually a transformer. And it transforms your work, your inheritance, your financial capacity into Dharma, it creates this center. And I encourage you to think about the importance of this place. The number of lives that are radically transformed here. The people who walk through the door with illness, or whose family, there's illness in the family, or who are facing the stunning challenges of being a human being. I don't know whether it's because I'm getting older and there's more challenges medically and so on, but I'm much more aware of how astoundingly difficult life is. Even living at the top of the heap, where I have my own car, I have central heating, I have hot water, no one shoots at anybody in my neighborhood. I did a little opening of the valve to the news this morning, and half a million children in northern Syria. And insane people ordering bombing runs on them. We're capable of really heinous things. So we're not dealing with that, but what we are dealing with is pretty damn difficult. And PIMC is a place, a light, where we get to practice and get some relief from the unremitting difficulty of being a human being. Unrelenting, I guess, is the word. So, if you'd like to support the center, you can go online, that's the best way, and become a member of the Stewardship Circle, make a monthly contribution. If you're a member of that and you'd like to take this opportunity to make it a greater contribution, then that'd be good too. And there's volunteering, there's tons of things you can do to volunteer. Misty is here today, one of our co-volunteer coordinators. And we together make this really amazing place happen. There's so much teaching happens near here. There's a reading group Monday night, Tuesday mornings, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Saturday retreat, so and it segues into the announcements. I'll put this back. There's also an iPad here that you can do the magic on and make a contribution. One of the things that we figured out, if you looked at coming to PIMC like a yoga class, and that each visit was worthy of a $15 contribution, we'd be completely solvent and at great ease, and we'd be able to do everything we need to do. So maybe think of that. Okay, onwards. Hello to those of you joining us out there in internet land. The announcements. The library is going to be magically open again sometime soon. Please sign up online for your Barking Dog Library ID number, or there's apparently papers outside the library. There's free Buddhist magazines in the living room shelf unit. Can only keep so much stuff. There's only one place to drop off library items now, which is by the library. And if you know what happened to our outdoor library book return box, I'd like to know. I don't care that much about it, but it's so strange, this black box disappeared. Gregory and Molly have been creating a digest online, and it really is a wonderful thing. It has all the information you need about upcoming classes and so on. And please sign up for the listserv. You can do that, I think, at the back of the room. You can certainly do it on the website, portlandinsight.org. And when you get the email, the digest, if you're If you're reading it, click on something. That helps us know whether you are there or not. All right, and now let's do the numbers. That was slick, don't you think? The music comes on, and then the Dow Jones is down 104 points. Next Sunday, the March 1st thing, when I have that, is newcomer orientation session with moi in the living room. Doyle is doing a winter class, intermediate skillful speech in relationships. That's coming up in March. This is all this information is also on the website. The first Saturday, there's a monthly day-long retreat with Gregory. I don't know about a theme for that, but that would certainly be worth doing. There's a potluck on the 2nd. There's an NVC practice group with Doyle. And the once-a-year Remembering Death retreat with Robert Beatty is a guest visiting teacher on Saturday, March the 14th. I highly recommend that you participate in that. This would be the 5th one, I think. And it's a really beautiful, heart-opening opportunity that day. On Sunday the 15th, Evening Star doulas the author, Kimberly Paul, is on a nationwide tour, Live Well and Die Well, and that's happening here. Good. There's a half-day Qigong with Jim in March. Buddhist movie night, Melancholia. A mindful hike with Vic later in the month. Oh, and then for anyone who volunteers, there's a retreat with Robert Beatty on the 28th. And then Richard Lang is here, just to mark your calendars. Richard Lang, a dear friend of mine and a kind of a world teacher, is coming to teach the Headless Way in April. I'm beeping. Stopped. Jim, are you open to Dharma consults? If you'd like to talk with someone about your practice, Jim is here today. He'll do 20-minute meetings with you. You can also call the office, call Avi, and he will schedule you with me or with one of the other teachers to talk about your practice, and it can be very helpful. I know one of a turning point in my life was when I met Ruth Dennison, and our first conversation was 6 hours, actually. We bumped into each other, and that was important. Living organic systems need information, energy from the outside in order to transform. And so having a teacher or someone to help guide us is really critical. Okay, that was a lot. It's like a different day outside now. Be sure to put on your sunscreen. something really has shifted for me in the last few months. I don't have real good words for it yet. Maybe I don't know that I will, but all those days that I spent in the ICU and on the couch at home, walking with a walker. It's like I've been tenderized somehow. And it makes the preciousness of each moment really much more tangible to me. There's a poem that came to mind yesterday, one of my favorites over time, in regard to what I want to speak about today, from William Stafford, who lived here in Portland. Incredible, lovely, gentle man. A word about him. I was at a men's conference a long time ago, 25 years ago anyway, here in Portland at a high school gymnasium. There were maybe 400 men, and Robert Bly and William Stafford. And Bly was talking about how prolific William Stafford had been. I don't know how you write so many books of poetry. And they were good friends. And Stafford replied, "Well, Robert, you just have to lower your expectations." And further conversation. And then William Stafford described, he said, between the kitchen and the bedroom, or the bathroom, I have a table, and I have a pad there. And before I leave the house, or maybe it was before breakfast, I write a poem every day. And then Bly said, "How can you do that?" He said, "You have to lower your expectations, but you do it." So this is one of his poems. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world. And following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. For there is many a betrayal in the mind. A shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending with shouts the horrible effects of childhood, storming out to play through the broken dike. Now, is that not a sentence? There's many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending with shouts the horrible effects of childhood, storming out to play through the broken dike. And as elephants parade, holding each elephant's tail, but one wanders. But if one wanders, the circus won't find the park. I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs but not recognize the fact. And so I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark. For it is important that awake people be awake. For a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep. It is important that awake people be awake, for a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep. Oop. I have notes. There. That's good. why do you meditate? Or why are you interested in meditation? Almost always we come to meditation seeking relief. We just like this mind to shut up for a while. Or like to be able to find a comfortable, quiet place, and or maybe some crisis has come along and it's overwhelming. I had another encounter this last week. It's a very common encounter. Anyone in my role runs into it with frequency. Someone comes in and they've been quite devoted to their meditation and they've stopped. They're not sure when they stopped, but they stopped. And maybe they started drinking again or using weed or shopping or something, some coping distraction. And then I get to ask the question, which is, what happened in your life around the time that you quit? And there's almost always something, some stressor or some disappointment, which raised the suffering level, which raised the dukkha level to such a degree that the person couldn't remain conscious anymore because it was overwhelming. There wasn't enough inner support or outer support. And so we regress, we have a relapse, we go back to our old coping mechanisms. And it's not a moral failure, it's just what we do. So, beyond relaxation, stress management, getting some rest, there's also we use meditation in order to become psychologically more healthy, to become able to deal with our sadness or anger or fear or desires, or to face the horrible effects of childhood, to face the trauma in our background, and to gradually become more psychologically and emotionally more available to ourselves, and therefore more capable of loving, and therefore more capable of relationship and productivity in the world. And then there's this other application or other where the direction that the meditation flows, which is asking the fundamental question, which is, who am I? Who am I and what am I doing here? What am I supposed to be doing? And what's the purpose? What's the point? What is the point of your life? It's a real and utterly important question. What's the point? I was having trouble with our phone. Our cell phones, our family cell phone system yesterday. And I talked to a guy in Louisiana, very upbeat fellow, and he talked about football as religion. And makes sense. What a strange religion. Tribal. I want to come back to that, tribal. So, I mentioned at the beginning that this practice is about opening the third eye. And it doesn't require, was it Ramtha? There was a writer and very early in my spiritual practice. I forget. Remember, Jim? Who was that? No. You remember there's this whole thing that they were using matchsticks and they were going to do a surgery and open the third eye, and it's behind the pituitary, and maybe that's true. I don't think so, though. I think the third eye is this capacity of awakeness that can see, that can know, that can use the teachings of the four foundations of mindfulness and become aware, really aware of the body. and become really aware of the liking and disliking that happens at the sense doors. You'll look at something and you like it or you dislike it. That can really become aware of the patterns of thought and the conditionings that come to us from our childhood and from our cultural conditioning. And really aware of the 5 hindrances: desire, aversion, restlessness, sloth, and torpor, doubt. Really aware of the 7 enlightenment factors. And that in this becoming aware of them, they come out of the woodwork. They've always been there, but somehow or another, I become capable of noticing them as other than I. I wonder, and I imagine many of you wonder, are we going to be able to, as a species, turn this thing around? Are we going to be able to learn to love one another and cooperate with one another in order to have a planet that's worthy of, or capable of, supporting us? And one way to look at it from the Dharma perspective is that all we need to do is wake up. All we need to do is bring enough awareness, enough mindfulness, concentration, energy, persistence, joy to observing this, and then seeing naturally everyone around us as ourselves, and seeing the way forward, which is really based utterly in love. And it's not based in political ideology or in opposition, and it's particularly not based in hatred. And one of the thoughts that was really stirring around in the last few days when I realized what I wanted to talk about today is the propensity that we have as human beings to create enemy images, to relegate the other to non-human. And many of you will, these are my 2 favorite factoids, I think. Right at the top anyway, if they're not the top 2. One goes like this, and it's from a little book called A Short History of Civilization. For 99.96% of our time as human beings with this brain, we lived in small hunting and gathering bands of 50 people or less. That 0.04% started with Mesopotamia. Civilization, crops, social organization. That other 99.96%, we lived in small hunting again. Oh, the oldest of us were 30, 35 maybe. That's a long time. And we were prey, and we weren't particularly nice to each other. It was hard scrabble survival of the fittest. We developed, we are mammals, we developed out of the mammalian world, and our primitive tribal survival methods can be provoked really easily. I mean, that's football. And it's good to have some ways to sublimate our tribal energies, but it's really important that we get to go beyond them, that we get to take the next step of evolution, which is consciousness evolution. Joanna Macy, one of my great heroines, proposes that we're on the brink, we're in the middle of the third great revolution. We had the cultural revolution, the Mesopotamia, and then we had the industrial revolution, and now we have, she calls it the great turning, and either we're going to make this step of consciousness evolution where we see each other as ourselves and learn to really share, or we're not going to make it. And that's okay. I mean, there's also another perspective on it, which is that's okay. The species we came into being and we'll go out of being as a species just as we come in as individuals. And there's nothing, I mean, this universe is just one swirling massive change. And there's this other factoid of a sort, which comes from the book Why Good People Do Bad Things. It's not why bad things happen to good people. It's why good people do bad things. And it's by James Hollis, and it's a Jungian perspective on why is it that we act in these very self-destructive ways. The first sentence of that book is, "The I that I know does not know enough to know that it does not know enough." The I that I know does not know enough to know that it does not know enough. And then the next few pages are kind of a summary of Jungian depth psychology, which is, my roots are in Buddhism and this Jungian piece then that forms my worldview and operational hypothesis. And then, he goes on to say essentially this: the conscious ego is a fragile island floating on a vast sea of unconsciousness we call the psyche. That which I call I is this fragile little thing. And there exist within the psyche complexes, which are autonomous complexes, which can and do usurp the ego. They blow the ego out of the water. And for example, do you have any compulsion or addiction which you do even years later, knowing that it would be much better if you didn't? If you have any of those, please raise your hand. Why don't you stop? Because you're not doing it. Because something from way deep inside is doing that. And it's autonomous. It has its own life. And when the autonomous complexes get into control, they have thoughts, feelings, plans, and they're totally discontinuous from who you think you are. So whatever are we going to do? This has been the same. It's human structure. And the Buddha came along and saw the same problems happening, and he said, "Why don't you wake up?" And you can, because there's a systematic way to train consciousness to reflect on itself, and then to start making better decisions. So, we sit down. Mindfulness of breathing is such a simple, it seems like a kindergarten practice, doesn't it? I'm gonna pay attention to my body. But the fact of waking up And being awake in the present moment then means that the experience that we have choice, happens. I'm very close to the end, getting my book published, and I'm writing a little foreword and a postscript. And one of the things that popped up was a memory, and I've had this experience in many different ways, but I was teaching at a drug and alcohol treatment center west of Portland some years ago, teaching meditation, and I would do an introduction to the new people coming in, and then I would teach them meditation for 2 or 3 months. There was a time when I did my little song and dance, which was quite similar to what I did here the first 45 minutes today. Basically a guided meditation. Notice that your mind wanders. And after it was over, this young woman came upstairs. I think she was a young doctor. They were mostly physicians at this treatment center. She came up and she had tears running down her face. And she said, Are you suggesting that if I develop this, I could become aware of my thoughts and feelings and decide which ones I follow? And I said, yeah. And she was just a puddle on the floors, because it hadn't occurred to her, as it hasn't to most human beings, that there was in fact something to do where she could take responsibility for and act skillfully in the face of whatever was coming up out of the unconscious, whatever the complexes, whatever the training from childhood, the horrible effects of childhood, that we could start planting different karmic seeds. We can start being more awake. We can start. I gave a talk a few, maybe months ago now, the way things have gone, but on skillful intention. What is my intention in life? Is it money, power, success, fancy car, gated community, blah, blah, blah? Or is it love? Is it compassion? Is it being of service to my fellow humans? And if it's the latter, how shall I behave? Well, if we don't see the impulses coming up, we've already acted on them. We don't have any agency. We are robotic. I like Bernie. You know, Jennifer, my wife, came up with a video of him 35 years ago. He was the same. I went to, years ago, it was in 2016 when he came to life and he came to Portland, and I went. I've never been to a political rally before, and before he spoke, a couple of young people got up and got the crowd really angry about what was happening. And I almost left, because it's the wrong message. If we're reaching out and encouraging our tribal instincts to hate the other side or to hate the leader of the other side, nothing's changed. It's another blind revolution into more darkness. So, is this making sense? Yeah. There's an exquisite teaching called the 12 Steps of Dependent Origination. The Buddha said that it was through realizing the 12 steps of dependent origination, that it was that realization that resulted in his waking up the night under the Bodhi tree. And there's one piece of that that's of extraordinary importance to anyone who's doing this meditation. The model goes like this. This exists, and because of this, there's this. Because of this, there's this. Because of this, there's this. This conditions this. This conditions this. This conditions this. And so on around the wheel of birth and death. Consciousness, rebirth linking consciousness, creates, causes, mind and matter. You're born. Mind and matter create the 6 sense doors: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, mind. Because there are the 6 sense doors, there is contact. Right now, there's seeing contact, hearing contact, touching contact. Because of contact, there is feeling. I want it, I don't want it. Liking, disliking, liking. And it's happening all the time with astounding speed. And then this is where it gets super interesting, because I'm going to move it over here. Because of contact and feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, indeterminate, because of that, then there's craving, wanting or wanting not. Because of wanting or wanting not, there's grasping. Grasping leads to becoming. Becoming leads to birth, sickness, old age, decay, death, and despair, and the circle goes around. It's a model with a reincarnation, a rebirth flair. But whether one believes in that or not, it's these phenomena that are so helpful, so important. Contact, feeling, craving, grasping, becoming. In any moment, no, I'm going to go a different way. Let's say there's some highly motivated charismatic authoritarian oriented person who has an audience, and he or she, they, can rev up in people images of fear. They can frighten people with images, stories. And then what that creates in the people, the individuals who have become a mob, are at the level of contact, feeling, at the level of feeling, it's anger or fear or it's agitation. And then that leads to, what can I do? Well, I can elect this person, or this one touched me badly, painfully. The number of hateful incidents directed at Americans of Asian descent is skyrocketing. Because those Chinese, and you can put any disgusting labels you want on, they bring all the bad diseases into the world, so why don't you go home? That's happening all over the United States, probably all over the world, actually. They sent that fellow, that poor, crazed fellow, what was his name, that slashed the throats of the people in the Max? Right. That we don't know what to do with him, so he certainly can't be in society, and they got him in jail. That's a good thing. We don't know how to help him. But what was happening with him? He got caught in these enemy images and was supported online by people who support these enemy images, and he didn't have a meditation practice capable of illuminating for him what he was about to do. He thought that was the right thing to do because he was insane. That making sense? And that's us on much lower. We do that all the time whenever we act out unskillfully. Be nice if he found himself in a caring, loving, supportive, monastic sort of context in jail, and 5 or 10 years from now had a realization that, oh, wow, I was really misguided. So, but back to us. Contact, a thought comes up, feeling, craving, an impulse to act, grasping, moving toward the action, grasping, and then we're off. And we become a person who has once again lashed out at our child, or once again, or there's a positive side, of course, which is, funny, I always think of the same example when I talk about this. Way back when the big tsunami hit Southeast Asia, I was looking, and there was a horrific image of lots and lots of bodies, and there was up in the corner a little thing from the Red Cross. And I spotted that, and I was thinking, what can I do? What can I do? And I realized I could send some money. And I was giving a talk on this dependent origination the next day, and I realized, oh, this is it too. Here's this altruistic impulse came in, and a desire to help, and so that's contact, feeling. The feeling was very pleasant, and I could then choose, well, there's a craving to act, and I can act on it, and I can be born, I can become a person who has been generous in response to suffering, and I can strengthen that part of my character. So what a huge thing to develop a mindfulness practice, to develop an awareness practice, to develop a practice of pausing and observing what's happening internally, to develop a practice of the third eye being turned on, and shaping myself over the next 30 seconds, 5 minutes, year, and so on, that cultivating in myself a person who I want to be, who actually is part of the great turning, versus being a person who is hypnotized by ideology and emotion and can be manipulated utterly easily to act in ways that are not in my best interest and not in the best interest of the people around me, but because they're tribal. And they're very, very energizing because there's an enemy. And of all the things that we've needed as an emerging species is the capacity to respond to an enemy. Right? When that tiger, wolf, whatever it was coming out of the woods, very important that my fight-flight system go right to fighting, because that's what had me survive, so to speak, as I was a proto-hominid back then. So, what have I missed? The world that we face right now is, I mean, it's bigger, it's on a global scale, but it's no different from the world at the time of the Buddha. There was lots of war around. When he died, there was a war happening. He was in the middle of a war zone. And really the question is, how do we want to respond? And I'm an advocate to the best of my ability in my own life, and I encourage it, and I think that's part of the mission of PIMC, is that we'll respond with as much love as we possibly can. And we will create of ourselves Buddhas along the way. And we'll see also our rough edges. We'll see how easily we're provoked back into primitive reactivity. And then own that and love ourselves because of it, because it's normal in us. And, I guess, let me just emphasize this piece, not surprisingly, I think it's really important to go to the gym often, to practice sitting down and training mindfulness, concentration, mindfulness, curiosity, energy, persistence, joy, concentration, tranquility, and equanimity, to practice them in environments which are low enough stimulation that I can actually develop them, which is our meditation seat. And to give that some time. It's great to practice for 5 minutes a day. But if we want to do this transformation of consciousness and our personality, why not take an hour? It's funny, the thoughts that arise. I have an acquaintance. I haven't seen her in some years. Maybe after this I'll call her this afternoon. A long-time Buddhist. She and I were on early retreats with Ruth Denison. She's traveled all over the world for years now, working with the top-level people of nonprofits, non-governmental organizations. And one day she's in Cameroon, and then a few days later she's in Thailand. But she said that the highest predictor for her of the outcome of a meeting is what she does in the hour before the meeting. And she has written into her contracts that they will have a private, quiet place for her for the hour before the meeting. That's the determining factor in the meetings, because who she is coming into the meeting is very formative. Now, how parents with small children do that, I don't know. I'm watching my son and his partner with my 2 grandchildren, and oh boy, 2 boys, a year and a half apart. So that's my plea for practice, and of doing our very best in this very troubling, difficult time to not hate anybody. If you find yourself hating anybody, watch for the enemy images. And there are some great targets for hating. But see what it feels like to be hating versus seeing the tragedy of this person or persons. And I, with my psychological background, I always want to inquire into their childhood and to see they're always traumatized. They're children of trauma, passing on the horrible effects of childhood out through the broken dike. So, anything to add? Question, comment? KB? Bless you, my dear.
I just had a question because you had talked about 7 things there that you were
The
practicing.
7 enlightenment factors.
And I don't understand how to practice joy, because joy to me seems like something that is an end product. And I don't experience that feeling very often, and I don't know how to get there.
Great question. When mindfulness and curiosity and persistence, energy, are practiced, and they're supported by a little concentration, then joy may just peek out. I've seen you in joy in Nelson. We can get overwhelmed, when you're in the trenches. It's pretty damn hard to get there. That's why I so recommend take time out of the trench, because we get in the trench and we get overwhelmed. But joy is our natural state. Joy and ease but not if we're under great stress, because then if we go back into survival mode, then we're hard scrabble, just trying to get by. Hang on, I want to say, can I out you? KB here has been down in Salem. Working so hard on behalf of all beings to get the cap and trade, the what's it called, the cap and invest, to do something about the carbon that Oregon is putting out into the world, and and she works tirelessly, and I keep telling her rest more, but she's right there on the front lines, so it's beautiful. And she does it with more and more love. Vic.
I had a two-part question.
Okay. No follow-ups.
Yeah. So I guess the first part is it possible to think of the 12 steps of dependent origination as a linear model as opposed to a cyclical model? It feels like trying to introduce a cyclical model tries to almost introduce the concept of rebirth, which is unnecessary in my opinion. So I guess maybe I'll stop at the first part question.
I think of it as it's a clunky model for the fact, which can be teased apart, that that which I take to be I have a choice in this moment of what I become in the next moment. I have some input, and that input arises through consciousness. Whether it's a circle or it's such a revolutionary thing, and it's not a cognitive thinking thing. It's an awareness thing. It's only through consciousness that I get to choose what thought to follow, for instance.
I guess the second part follows that, where is there any part of the 12-step process which is a point of no return, where you're saying, well, if you're at step 7, well, it's just going to go on to 8, 9, and 10, or can you say you can stop at any individual point?
There's traditionally seen as 2 breaking points. One is the essence of mindfulness practice, which is between feeling, craving, grasping. We can stop and just feel the feeling, then it doesn't happen. We're not reinforcing that. Or we can be in the middle of the craving and suffer the craving and realize, I don't want to do that, because that's going to lead to consequences I don't want. So there's those. But then way up at the top here, there's ignorance. Because of ignorance, we do things. If ignorance is eliminated, if for a moment, just to look around the room, if for a moment we could realize that there's only one of us here, and that none of us were ever born and none of us ever die, then the whole thing breaks. Because there's no one to do anything. And that's the jewel at the heart of the lotus. That's the core of the Buddhist teaching. That's the experience the indescribable experience that he, they, we are, quote, seeking, or, and then the only thing that's left then is loving. It's very difficult to talk about, but I mean, that's, there's this tender spot in me. Gosh, it's clearer to me than ever that the only thing that's worth doing is loving each other. We have to take stands and, we have to be responsible, but anytime the mind, heart-mind, moves toward aversion or just wanting, or that, it's always just ignorant suffering. Hard to talk about, but there's the reality. Melanie said, "Don't talk about death tomorrow." We're really all going to die. And much sooner than we believe. Huh? Yeah, and much sooner than we believe. And it'll always be too soon, or probably, but with that remembrance, if you're facing someone and realizing this person came out of nowhere and they're here and they're doing this, and then they're going to disappear again, how can we not love each other? It's so tears. Pooh. Not sure what this thing is that keeps coming up, but do we have kids in the chute? Well, I always think of like bucking broncos or the cattle. Well, thank you for coming today. Thank you for listening. I am very privileged and grateful to be able to play this role. I hope it's helpful. And may we have a wonderful day today, recognizing the choices that we're making, of the seeds we're planting, of who we're becoming. All right. Thank you. And we're going to do a little closing now, just another 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, getting the kids to come in and engaging them. Sweetheart. Come on, stop. Hi. Did you have fun beading? Oh, did you make that today? Nice. Cool. What's that one? Oh. So, please find a hand on your left and your right if you can. A real hand, living, breathing, connected to a person. Take a moment to look at the person on your left and your right. Make eye contact, maybe. And think a kind thought for the person on your right. Why not? You may not know them at all. You may never have seen them before, but you know that they need to be loved and affirmed and supported. Wish them well. Give their hand a little squeeze. And then the person on the left, give that hand a little squeeze. Wish well. And around our circle, hand to hand, heart to heart, we're in this together. And may all beings share in the merits of our practice today. And then, I'm going to look for the microphone. Here we are. Do we have the four of you? All right. Can you all get close? Get close to the microphone. Are we ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, go.
May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Very nice. Well, do you have a wish? Have you thought about a wish that you'd like to wish for yourself and the world and your parents? You're not going to tell me. No, wishes are secret. So the next thing to do is to gather around, and I'm going to count. No blowing before I get to count. And no catching your hair on fire, please. Thank you very much. You are a lucky one. That means you can get closer. All right, is everybody in the big circle ready to breathe in? Take a big, and those of you out on the internet, breathing in. 1, 2, 3, blow. Yes! Yay! All wishes are granted. Please do come and have a cup of tea or coffee and connect with ourselves.